Now let's bootstrap our application using the Ionic CLI. Before we do that, we need to install the CLI, the Ionic, and the Angular CLI. And you can do that with npm install-g for global, Ionic, and @Angular CLI/CLI. Now after this is done, we will have access to the Angular CLI with ng. And we're also gonna have the Ionic CLI. And this is the command we use to install our to start our application, Ionic start. Although you could generate your project with the Angular CLI, the Ionic, it will add some schematics to your Angular project, mainly for the pages. So you'll be able to create pages with it. So we're going to use the Ionic CLI. Now you can just do Ionic start. If you do -h, it's gonna tell you what commands you can use for this Ionic start, which is basically you tell the name of the app and which template you want to use. Name and template. So right now we have a blank template, tabs, and we also have a side menu. Under options, you have this type over here, which right now by default, it's gonna set as an Angular application. But because Ionic is working on launching its Vue and React integration, in the future, you may need to specify the type. So let's get started, and I'm first gonna navigate to my desktop. You can add your files wherever you want. And here I'm gonna call Ionic start, and this will launch the wizard, which is gonna ask you a few questions and help you to set up your project. So you can name your project whatever you want. I'm gonna call it ngblog. And here are the templates. Let's start with the side menu, just to save some time. I'll go through the components in this lesson. So side menu. The Ionic CLI uses the Angular CLI underneath, but he also adds a few more schematics, and he also sets a few defaults on your application. Here on the app flow, I'm just gonna say no, but you can say yes if you want. I won't be using it, so. Now, if you do ls to list your files, you can see that our folder is in there. I'm gonna cd into it. Now, this is are the files that was created, and we can open it with the codes editor. Now, here are the files that was created. We have a source folder with our application folder, and here is where we're gonna put our files, our components. We already have two components pre-made, a home component and a list. The app routing is our main route for application, which we put all our top level URLs. So let's start the application with npm start command, and we'll see if everything works. So npm start. By default, the Angular application, it's launched on localhost 4200. So if you just open your browser and type this, you can find your application here. Here are the two components that was pre-made. So you have a home and the list. If you open up your DevTools and you use the bar to move it, you can see that the template is already responsive. And whenever you reach about 1000 pixels up here, you can see that the side menu collapse, and you have this button over here. So let's do some cleanup, remove these warnings, and let's get started. Back in our coding editor, it's gonna minimize the terminal. I'm gonna delete this list component because we won't be using it. Now here on the app routing module, we need to remove also the list component here, the reference. And inside our app components, there's this array with the pages. And this is the side menu in here, the entries for the side menu. Now we can remove this list. And those warnings on the terminal, we can just comment it out, these 2 entries over here. Now if you reload your page, you have just the home and the warnings on the console is gone. Now let's go to our package.json. I'm just going to remove some of these Ionic framework placeholders in here, the description at the bottom. And I'm just going to add my own over here, but you can change these details in here for yours. And you also don't need to add private through in here because it's not a package. Okay. Under home component, we can delete this ion content, everything that's inside the ion content. And instead of that, I'm just going to add a simple hello world in there. Now inside our index.html, let's just change the app name. Again, this is whatever you added as a name. Now back in our application, everything works okay. The menu. Now let's take a look how this menu works. Right now it's collapsing at 1000. If you take a look at the Ionic documentation, if you go under components and you scroll down to menu, here you have the split pane. So on this page it has everything to do with the split pane, some information how to use it. And if you scroll a bit down, you can see that you have this setting the breakpoints, which you can use this when property and set for different size of device. The default breakpoints are these ones. We have XL, LG. Right now we're using the LG in there, which is the default. If you scroll down, you have the properties down here, which tell you what are the defaults that comes with it. As you can see here is LG. So let's change the when and see how it works. Back in our code, I'm going to go to the app component.html and here's our split pane. I'm going to add when. Right now it's LG, so I'm going to put SM, which is the smallest screen size for mobile phones. Now back in our page, if I reload, now I can shrink all the way down to 600 pixels and only then the menu is gonna collapse. Still works the same. And you can also disable this breakpoint check if you just want the sidebar to be collapsed all the time. You can set the disable to true. Here it defaults to false. Disable true. Now it will collapse all the time, no matter the screen size. The sidebar in here as well, you can change the style of it. Right now we have using the overlay, which is the menu appears on top of the content and add this shadow drop. Now back in the documentation, if you take a look at the Ion menu, you can set it which side you want, right or left, to be open. This menu ID is only in case you're using multiple menus, like one on each side. And if you scroll all the way down, you have a type over here. And there are 3. We're using the default is the overlay, review and push. The push, it's quite interesting. It will push your content out of the viewport. So let's set it out and see. Here on our code, you can just do type and push. Now if you take a look at our application, whenever you open it, it's going to push the content on the side instead of showing the overlay on top. It's quite nice for desktop, but if you use it on a mobile phone, it's kind of weird, but it's up to you. This is design. It depends on your use case. Inside this menu component, we have our header and the Ion content. This is the part where you can change everything. Here we have the Ion list, which is displaying that app page array from our app component here at the top. You can add more links over here and you'll be included in this loop, the ng4. Or you can change it all together for a different style of menu. Now I'm gonna reverse this back to overlay. And that's basically the application we get from the Ionic CLI. You could play around with the new, with the other templates, but in this course we're gonna see how to create the pages with tabs. We already have this side menu. It's really simple to use, so I see you in the next lesson.